Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in again. I would like to talk today about submitting to those in government, and it fits especially today, but it fits in our society any day. It would have worked to talk about this a month ago. It will work to talk about this in 6 months. I'm convinced of it. So I'd like to read some verses from Romans 13, verses 1 to 6. Every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise for the same, for it is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the one who practices evil. Therefore it is necessary to be in subjection, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience' sake. For because of this you also pay taxes. For rulers are servants of God, devoting themselves to this very thing. We are finding this time difficult because we are concerned about getting sick, we're concerned about loved ones getting sick, but we are finding it hard to adapt to the restrictions being imposed upon us by those in government because we are used to freedom of movement. And I'm not sure how long it will take. There's a measure of it starting already, where there are those who are saying that we should not have to be restricted. We should be free to move. We should be free to work as we choose. And it's heavy-handed for the government to do this. But the Bible tells us that we are to submit to those in authority. And as far as Scripture is concerned, the only exception to this would be found in Acts 5:29, where it says, "But Peter and the apostles replied, or answered, we must obey God rather than men." It does not fit that the restrictions against us now qualify for the exception in Acts 5:29. At this point, the government is telling us that we cannot meet together in groups. In Saskatchewan, this is limited to groups of 10 people or more now in public or private gatherings. But the restriction is not specifically against Christians or churches, but it's all areas of society. So Christians are not being singled out. We're not being told that you cannot worship. We're being told that you cannot gather in groups, however that would be. And so Christians should be the most respectful towards authority because we are told to do so. In verse 1, it says, "There is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God." This is pretty clear. The governments are in power because God has put them there. I may not like it, but I cannot disagree with the text, and that refers to any level of government, whether it be municipal, provincial, or federal. Whether I voted for the Liberal government is irrelevant once they are in power. During the election process, I have that freedom to vote. But once a government is put in place, it is not my freedom as a Christian to disrespect them. It is my obligation as a Christian to come under their authority, willingly, voluntarily, not because they have the power to impose it, but because I choose to obey God. And by obeying God, I choose to obey those that He has put in power. The only exception to this would be a law which forbids me to do what God has commanded, or commands me to do what God has forbidden. And I do not believe that the current laws that are in place qualify for that. Today, I am not commanded to do something that God would forbid. There's opportunity to do things legally that God would forbid, but it's not a command. In the same way, there is not a restriction to do something that God has commanded. There's a temporary restriction or limitation on us gathering together. And yet, methods like this, putting videos on different platforms, they allow the message of the Scripture to continue to go forth. We still have all the technology that we have ever had. There are a variety of ways to communicate with one another, and we are still free to do that. And so this must not be seen as greater than what it actually is. And I have heard of some Christians who have questioned whether or not we should be staying home. I believe we should be. Is the danger real? Well, whether it is or isn't, the restriction placed on us by the government is. And as a Christian, it is my responsibility, and God will hold me accountable, to what degree I choose to submit to what the government has put in place. Again, provincially, federally, it does not matter. It does not matter if I agree with the government that is in place. God holds me accountable for how I respond to it. And the church throughout the ages has had many opportunities to be respectful towards a government that clearly did not stand for the principles that God stood for. And yet the church was expected to submit. And that is true for us today. So my challenge for us today is to evaluate not only our hearts, but the things that we are saying. Do we speak in a way that is respectful? Do our actions agree with that statement that we are being respectful? And especially in our society today, I don't know that there has been a point in time in Canadian society where there is this open disrespect towards authority, whether it be government, whether it be police, any hierarchy of authority within our society is disrespected at every turn. And if we want to be seen as different, here's a golden opportunity. Live, act, speak, and think respectfully towards those in government, and we will be noticed. Take care.